Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Today's video is the last of the 2024 quarterly wrap-up series for me, and that is everything I read in quarter 4 of 2024. And a quick update on how I did with my reading challenge. Every year I do the Goodreads reading challenge like a lot of people, and to just check in and see some of the statistics, whether or not it went well. Spoiler alert, it did. And a little heads up into what I'm planning for 2025. Firstly, in October, Mary B., An Untold Story of Pride and Prejudice by Katherine J. Chen. Now, if you recall the name Katherine J. Chen, you will know that I read the other book that I know of that she's written called Joan, which was about Joan of Arc. I read that for my library book club much earlier in the year, and because I had seen that this was another book that she had published, I decided I would give it a try. My main familiarity with Mary Bennett, Mary B. in this case, is from the original novel Pride and Prejudice, and the way that that character is portrayed in the 2005 film of the same name. Do not come for me about my enjoyment of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice film, because we are going to get to that later. Mary B. is essentially a retelling of the events that happened after the end of Pride and Prejudice. We get a wee bit of the story of everyone, you know, getting together, falling in love, getting married happily ever after, and then the fallout from that. And this essentially, in my opinion, I did not enjoy this book at all, and I am someone that does not mind if there are multiple or all of the characters are awful. Like, genuinely, I will be okay if everyone is terrible, because more often than not I find people who are terrible in books to be some of the most interesting, because if it's written well and you can write into and out of those ideas, then what's the problem? However, this book, as what is essentially a revisionist text, endeavors to make everybody else, all other characters' lives miserable, removes any great qualities from them, and makes their lives miserable so that Mary, who in the original work is generally perceived to be pretty miserable, people make fun of her, etc., so that she can be happy and she can be the star of the show. There are a lot of negative reviews on Goodreads about this book. I genuinely don't feel that I can have an opinion that is different or better put than those. But in the course of reading this book, I kept thinking to myself, that's not Mary. That's not something that Mary would do. And in actuality, we really don't know what Mary would or would not do, because we don't honestly know a lot about her from the original text. So in this case, everything lends itself to possibility, everything lends itself to speculation, and it can be whatever the author, in this case Katherine J. Chen, wants it to be. I just don't think that those traits, having scraped everything positive from someone else and giving characters the opportunity to make a lot of extraordinarily poor decisions that are not in line with what we know about them from the original work, makes sense. I don't think that that's a great way to write. I don't think that that's the way to give someone who you feel did not get enough screen time or airtime in the original a story of her own. If you've read this book and you have a different opinion, I would absolutely love to know about it, because I did not come away from this thinking that I ever wanted to read it again. However, I will say that it did set me on a course of feeling that I needed to reread Pride and Prejudice, the original, to determine exactly what I was remembering or misremembering as this went on. So I began the audiobook of Pride and Prejudice concurrently with this, and that will make an appearance later in this video. From there, I moved on to another book that received an incredible number of negative reviews on Goodreads, and that was What Time the Sexton's Spade Doth Rust by Alan Bradley. This is the 11th book in the Flavia de Luce mystery series. You will have known, if you've watched all of these quarterly wrap-up videos, that I have been rereading the Flavia de Luce mystery series throughout this year in anticipation and / or around the publication of this book, which, as noted, was a surprise. I don't think any of us knew that this was coming out. To me, at least, I saw that it was being made available and I said, great, I will happily take another. This is a cozy mystery series. I'm not going to go into serious detail here, because my love for these books is all across this channel, spanning many videos and many years, some of which are in higher definition and of higher quality than others. However, this book, readers on Goodreads were extraordinarily unkind to, essentially saying that over time these stories have gotten tiresome and weary, and you know, we're doing a lot of different things here to try to keep this plot alive when it doesn't need to be left alive, and wouldn't it just have been better if we had ended this at 10 books like was planned? And I don't think that was the case. This book is a serious departure from the original plot and intentions of the first 10. They take their foundation from the end of the first 10 books, and then they run with it into a new place. And I really feel that if you read closely, and especially read this book in time with the original, the first one, The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, you will see that if it wasn't already planned at the beginning, Alan Bradley has done an excellent, like a really exquisite job of going back to what he had already written and littering in possibilities along the way to open new doors into the story, and maybe having not taken them, but calling back to those in book 11. It's very well and very intricately laid out so that I could very clearly see all of the things from the past books that I've read so far that were then either tied up or untied and opened up and ready to move into in book 11. The thing about having a 10-book series set in 1950s, you know, small village in England just after the war is that it's the same problem that I have with a show I've never watched, Only Murders in the Building, wherein there can only be so many murders, only so many people can die, there can only be so many problems before it gets to be unbelievable. So it was obvious that that attitude, that way of thinking for that set of books had run its course. There weren't enough people either coming to, traveling through, living in, or living nearby Bishop's Lacey in order to merit another 10 books. It wasn't going to happen. The story had to change somehow, and I think this is a perfectly reasonable, rational explanation for what happened, and gives the reader and new readers even something better, perhaps something more interesting to latch onto. I don't know that this book was necessary, but I certainly don't think that it was unnecessary. I next picked up I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue. This book is about a woman who is having a very hard time existing in her office environment. The people that she works with are highly toxic, and she herself is battling an internal struggle of like, what does she want to do with her life? Also anxiety and depression. I can't remember what pairing I called this in my review of this book, but I think it was akin to The Office meets My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, with a little bit of like a rom-com vibe sprinkled over the top. This got a lot of hype from the publisher. I saw it like pushed a little bit on Goodreads. There were like big doings around this book. I thought it was fine. I wasn't really blown away either by any of the characters in particular, or how the story was resolved, or the, you know, the journeys that we had and the friends we made along the way. The most interesting thing about this book is that the people that made mistakes owned their mistakes and recognized they were mistakes and didn't try to get around them by like convenient plot means. They just dealt with them like normal people would do. And I thought that was a little bit refreshing. Was it as like swoony and interesting as a regular rom-com would be, or a romance novel would be? No, it wasn't. But it was real. You know, if you're casually interested in it, it's certainly worth your time. I don't know that I would read it again, but I certainly didn't dislike it. The October book for our library book club was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This author is someone who the book club has read before. They really liked The Gods of Jade and Shadow. The opinions on this book were very divided. A lot of people didn't like it. I had someone call it completely distasteful and refuse to finish it, and somebody else said that it was an absolute homage and careful, well-balanced blending of every other Gothic novel out there, and a real presentation and wrapping up of the genre. I myself didn't know where to land. I'm not exceptionally familiar with a lot of Gothic novels other than Jane Eyre. It did not have an exceptionally Jane Eyre flavor other than, you know, Big House on a Hill. I do think the writing in this was very strong. I can see, based on others' opinions and reactions, definite links to even the tiniest bits and pieces of information that I know about other Gothic literature, and I can see the careful weaving that the author has done in order to create a really comprehensive, like, quick one-book picture of what all of these other like Gothic novel traits might be. I will say that this book deals with a lot of sensitive subject matter. It is not for people who are squeamish, and if you are not interested in gaslighting, any sort of allusion anywhere close to the realm of domestic or sexual abuse, this is not a book for you. This is very creepy, very dark, and if for some very distasteful, but for what the author may be trying to do, it's a very well done, well written piece of work. That moves us into November, where I finally finished listening to the audiobook of Pride and Prejudice. I read Pride and Prejudice one time, and that I believe was in high school with Bex, and we read it as part of a big reading journey that we did in our second year. And this time I chose to listen to it, and I will say it was a much more enjoyable experience. I very much liked having it performed for me, especially as I was driving, so that I could imagine what was going on instead of relating it either to what I already know from, again, the incredible 2005 movie or from something else. There were a lot of moments in here that I did not remember from my first read, and it helped to have somebody read it to negate sort of the aspects of it that were distracting the first time around, either really long sentences or turns of phrase that, you know, when I was 16 I didn't totally understand in the way that I do now, and just other things and other ways that characters are, things they said, characteristics of them that I hadn't noticed from the beginning. I had the opportunity here to then spend a lot of time with the BBC miniseries, which I watched for the first time. Both my partner and I were sick, and he and I watched it together and did some comparisons between what happens in the book and what happens there. I know a lot of people hold it up as like the most impossibly incredible, faithful adaptation to the book. I'm just gonna tell you, y'all, it's kind of boring. It's real boring. It's absolutely faithful, sure, in a lot of different ways. Is some of that dialogue absolutely verbatim? 100%. But I don't know what y'all are on about with some of these big hot takes on the internet that have been out there for years and years and years. Listen, the emotionality of it is so minute, and that is what I think draws me to the film more. Does the film cut things out? Does the film shorten, tighten things up? Does the film leave you to fill in some blanks for yourself where it doesn't spell out what happens for you? Yes. I'm not saying it's an impressively 100% faithful adaptation. No, I'm saying it gives you what any good piece of media should do, which is feeling, emotionality, deep connection to characters, and I did not get the same level of that from the BBC miniseries. So is my favorite adaptation, other than the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, go check it out, always going to be 2005's movie? Absolutely. Don't come for me. I'm not changing my mind. Our November book for book club was The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This is another book that I have seen a lot of places, everywhere, in the library, out of the library, on Goodreads, off Goodreads, etc., etc. This story follows two characters, neither of whom is happy, one of whom is deeply unlikable, and folks who are estranged from each other for an incredible amount of time, in fact, lifetimes. It traces the lives and times of this one specific area of coastal Maine and the indigenous people that were such a big part of agriculture in that area. This book is really a portrait of what happens when we do not offer people significant and comprehensive mental health resources. It is not lost on me that the mental health resources, while they are certainly not enough, but that are out there today, are leaps and bounds greater than I think what was socially acceptable and available to folks in the back half of the 20th century. Psychological science has come so far, and I read this book thinking there were just so many pieces of these problems that could be solved so simply if these people had just been provided and the correct psychological support, and that it had been okay and acceptable to do so. An interesting comment from the book club about this book was someone who just did not like it at all because there was no moment in it that was happy. And I don't know that I agree there. There was certainly one character, his name is Joe, who is aggressively unhappy and has many, many reasons to be. The entire book, he is recollecting on his life. I should say nothing really ever happens. Most of this book is pretty much a recollection until close to the end, where like something occurs. And this man is just recollecting on his life and talking you through how he got to where he is and trying to, you know, settle a lot of internal scores with himself and make himself feel okay for the mistakes that he's made. And meanwhile, the other narrative in this book is a woman who's really trying to figure out who she is and what she wants and how she's been guided by some of the really bad choices of people in her family. And for that reason, the person who raised this opinion that they did not like this book because there was nothing good to latch onto and no one to like. I didn't feel that way. I definitely felt that it was worth kind of listening to these folks' recollections and rememberings, but I can certainly see how if you need somebody to like, if you need somebody to root for in a book, and especially if you like need a plot to move along rather than just, you know, okay, here's pretty much how most of the mystery has gone, let me tell you all about it, then this is not a book for you. But if you like a stream of consciousness type of novel, and I guess if you've made it this far through the video, maybe you do, this is certainly a book I would try out. Shortly after this, American Thanksgiving rolled around, and from American Thanksgiving through New Year's, everything in my life gets a little out of control. There's a lot going on. It's very busy. It's pretty stressful. So we roll away from the books that for me demand a little bit more of a cognitive load to the books where I am very comfortable in that I will always know what will happen. Which brings me to my first holiday romance book, Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. I think that I downloaded this on my Kindle because there was a book I was waiting on that hadn't come in yet from the library. I had it on hold, and this was recommended to me instead, so I tried this, and I actually thought that this was great. As far as holiday rom-coms go, this is contemporary. This is about a woman who, yes, owns a Christmas tree farm, and it's failing, and what do they need to do? And you can tell that there is a lot in this book that is, you know, oh, we're gonna contrive this to make this happen, as opposed to putting in a real plot point. And I thought there was a nice balance of both that and adding in real plot points. I really liked these characters. I loved looking for the moment of miscommunication, then seeing how they were gonna resolve it. I'm actually waiting to read the other two that come with these, because more often than not, when you have a contemporary romance like this, there will be a character and then there will be 2 more books about the auxiliary characters around them. So there are 2 more coming, and I'm keen to see how this author will handle the characterizations and personalities of those folks in those books as well. A brief interlude for the third Alan Bradley Flavia de Luce mystery series book, A Red Herring Without Mustard. What's not to love about these? Nothing. You can't even not love book 11. A Red Herring Without Mustard moves away from, oh, there's been a murder of someone in my town, and oh, there's been a murder of someone who's come into town, to, oh, someone has come into town and now there is a murder of someone who is probably from here. As usual, Flavia is on the case. I appreciated in this book something that I did not remember, which was the seriousness of the police really getting irritated with her. Inspector Hewitt and his constabulary are very irritated at this point. By book 3, they're like, Colonel DeLuce, please keep your daughter in the house. Like, we cannot have her anywhere near this. This is a little bit ridiculous. And lo and behold, she finds her way to it anyway. Had forgotten about that with this, and I'll be keen as I continue to read the series to see how that pops up. Finally, a book came off my Kindle hold list, and that was The Wakeup Call by Beth O'Leary. This book follows 2 front desk associates at an extraordinarily fancy hotel. These 2 people hate each other. This is an enemies to lovers situation, and I thought this was very well done. There was just enough animosity from each of them. There was enough reality to them and the things that they were doing to irritate each other, that it felt very realistic. I could totally envision where they were working and seeing that it happened. There are some pieces about the book other than that area of their relationship, so from that angle, very realistic, totally could see it. The other angle of if something major happened in a hotel and there needed to be serious construction, they would not let people stay there. It would not happen. They would absolutely need to close that building for all kinds of legal insurance liability reasons. So the premise of this, in that these 2 people don't like each other, they're working for this hotel. The hotel is on uncertain financial footing and definitely needs saving, and then the roof falls in. That's not a huge spoiler. It happens right at the beginning of the book. Even though the roof falls in, do they let people stay in the hotel over Christmas? They do. That's not real. That's not a reality. And that, my friends, is the magic of the contemporary romance book. So it follows these 2 as they work their way to each other. I appreciated the dialogue in this, and that people were not calling each other by their names constantly. It's a real area of irritation of mine, is when people constantly refer to each other by their names when there's nobody else in the room and it could not be clear about to whom they are talking. So this book avoided that. It was very nice. It was very Christmassy, and I appreciated the conclusion, particularly because it didn't have all of the fancy sparkle and, oh, thank God everything just turns out perfectly that a lot of other books in this genre do, but it turns out in a very satisfying way. Now, when you read on a Kindle, the Kindle will recommend things to you, and if you've been following my quarterly wrap-up series this year, you'll know that I've been burned significantly by that before. So I was a little trepidatious when I saw there was this like collection of short stories from famous romance authors, all bundled up into whatever, you know, Amazon's horrible publishing conglomerate is, but one of them was by Ali Hazelwood, the author of The Love Hypothesis and several other books, and I generally like Ali Hazelwood's work, and I chose to read her little novella. It was called Cruel Winter with You. It was very cute. It was entirely what you would expect from Ali Hazelwood, and I was appreciative of it because it didn't have, there wasn't time for it, honestly. It didn't have the huge emphasis on science and STEM that her STEMinist novels do, and I was fine with it. Normally I know her as, like, you know, she blends those lines of hard science and romance novel, and that was not overwhelmingly as present here, and it was cute. I would be interested to see if that is an area that she wants to move into in the future, or if she's just going to kind of stay in this lane that she's forged for herself, and in an area that I don't really think many other people, if anyone else, is conquering. However, it was after reading this book that I recognized that I wasn't sure I actually wanted to read any more, you know, Christmas rom-com books, but I did want to read more Ali Hazelwood. So I went back to Love Theoretically, which is her third book in her STEMinist series, and it doesn't fail to disappoint. It was exactly how I remembered it. Laughed in all the same places. It's that idea of comfort reading. I'll read a book till the day is long, my friends, over and over again. I've already spoken about this book. This is now the second time I've read it. It was great. In fact, I bought it. I bought the book on my Kindle so I can have it all the time. I don't have to worry about whether I've lent it out or whether I've lost it. So that's actually something that I've realized is a great Kindle perk. I then found my way over the holidays to Jen McKinley, who is the author of Love at First Book and Summer Reading, both of which I think are a pair in what is soon to be a trio of books. Like I mentioned before, it's that same idea. I started with Love at First Book, which is the story of a woman who has just what sounds like a terrible home life and an incredibly overbearing mother who is narcissistic and hates her, and like, thank goodness that she is getting the mental health support that she needs in order to manage that area of her life, but she manages to escape this somewhat and moves across the world to Ireland and becomes the research assistant for one of her favorite authors of all time, an author of a series that seems a little bit like in the Percy Jackson vein, but without the Greek mythology, and is also part-time working in a bookstore. She magically gets someone to sponsor her visa in order to do that, which is alarming. And lo and behold, does she fall in love with the bookstore owner? Probably. Anyway, it's very nice. There are some interesting turns of phrase that this author uses that show up not only repeatedly in the book, which I'm not wild about, but also from book to book. So you can always kind of expect them to show up. So when I moved on after that book to listening to Summer Reading, I started to hear them. And as I was driving, I was able to, along with the audiobook narrator, know exactly where and say along with her some of these different turns of phrase. I don't know that is really something that we want to look forward to in our reading, but it is certainly a hallmark of this author's work, and these were fine. I don't think I would go out of my way to recommend them, but they were nice stand-ins for the fact that I did not get any of the holiday romance books off of my holds list in time for me to go home for Christmas. But the book that I really want to talk about in these videos actually arrives at the end. I finished it on December 30th, and it's a book that I read through all of December because it was our December book club pick, and that is The Extinction of Urena Ray by Jennifer Croft. This book I've heard a bit about from place to place. This book is about 8 different translators. They are book translators, and they all almost exclusively work for Urena Ray on her work, translating it from Polish into their many languages. So there's 8 of them. They each serve a different market. Let's start from the beginning. The book itself, the physical book itself, the story that you pick up when you buy the book or bring it home from the library, is by a woman named Jennifer Croft. she herself is a translator. And once you open the book, the warning to the reader, not an author's note, but the warning to the reader is written by one of the characters in the story who is a translator, who has gone and translated the book that was written by another one of the characters in that story from original writing in Polish into English. So you have a physical book that you're reading by a real human author that has been, allegedly, is a story that has been written by one of the characters and then translated by another one of the characters. So there are a lot of layers here to understanding what you're reading, and by all accounts, this is a book that I should like. It's got a lot of weird stuff going on. It's got a couple layers that you have to sort through, and it's got what, in the end of the day, seems to be an unhinged main character and two people who are actively fighting with each other the whole time, not only in the plot, but also in the text. And it's being done in this like very snide, remarkable way. I was very impressed by it. And for some reason, I just don't know that I liked this book. I've said a couple times now that I don't really need to have a character to root for in order to enjoy something, but there is something about the main character or author of this book, or of the story, I guess, that one is following, that was just so irritating and naive and not forward looking that I could not get over. I was so fed up with her. I was like, my God, Emmy, just get to the point. Like, we get it. You're upset. You feel like you're the only one following the rule. It was spending so much time in her head and then hearing like the little jibes about everything that she's thinking and the way that she's recounting the events by the person translating the work. I just like couldn't take it. By the end, I was so pleased to have finished it because I couldn't handle any more of their like back and forth about it and any more of Emmy's complete garbage and misinterpretation of how things were rolling out. I don't want to say too much more about this book if you do choose to read it and you haven't already. It's wild. There's so much to uncover. I've seen some interesting commentary around it whereby the actual author of the real book itself, Jennifer Croft, she's translated some other real life authors and she name drops them in these books, and there are folks who are speculating that she may have just severed relationships with those authors in doing so and in publishing this, because she does not really portray the world of translation and what is allowed and what is not allowed, and the way that translators get to interact with authors and editors and publishers in the best light. So there's some fascinating stuff going on there. If you're looking for a very cerebral, layered journey and you want to know things you've never known about lichens, moss, mushrooms, bacteria, because that's another key piece of this, then this is the book for you. I encourage you that if you're looking to read something weird this year, you try this book, formerly known as Amadou. And that's how I completed the year. So last year I set out to read 35 books and instead I read 54. In fairness, a lot of those were very easy for me to read. I burned through a lot of those with contemporary or historical romance novels. I read at a minimum 20,138 pages, although Goodreads doesn't really calculate pages correctly in some of the audiobook. My average book length was 375 pages, but I think that's only because I wound up reading whatever that Sarah J. Maas series is, Crescent City. I read those three, which certainly upped the average for me. This year I'm trying to read 50 books once again, and I'm hoping this year that more of those books will be in the more cerebral, layered, new adventures of different media, trying to get through some of the stuff that you see behind me and back to my days of picking up books that I didn't necessarily know how they were going to end. There wasn't a formula I could follow, and I didn't have to anticipate what the miscommunication twist might be. If you've read any of the things that I've talked about today, I would love to hear your thoughts and commentary down in the comments. Anything that you want to know about us is, of course, in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you very soon.